All right, great. Well, welcome everyone to Deciphering OSHA's Compliance Intricacies webinar. Thank you all so much for joining us. Today's presentation is being recorded and the recording will be emailed within 2 business days. As you have questions, you may post them in the Zoom Q&A and we'll answer those questions at the end of today's call. We will try our best to answer all of your questions at the end of today's presentation, but if for whatever reason we're unable to get to your question today, please email learning@nfp.com. That's learning@nfp.com. And we'll do our best to get back to you. At this time, I'd like to introduce our speakers for today's webinar. Joining us is Elsa Tai, leader of the OHS group of NFP, and Hamed Abuzaid, senior OHS and quality management consultant, OHS group of NFP. We're very excited to have them speaking with us today. So without further ado, it's my great pleasure to hand the call over to our speaker. Elsie, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Leo. Welcome everybody. And I'm sorry I don't know who or where you're from, because I would prefer to make this more customized, but since you're all here, and I'm going to make this kind of general, and hopefully you can ask your questions in the end. This is Deciphering OSHA Compliance Intricacies, and it's basically highlights of Hamlet. And I'm going to go over a lot of things very quickly because I'd rather keep you spinning than bored. So let's quickly go to who does OSHA actually cover. It basically covers private sector employers and their workers, including small employers. And of course, there are different definitions of what small means, but generally speaking, for OSHA, it's 50 employees or less. It does not cover most federal and state government employees, and there are 22 state plans, and there are 6 plans that cover just state employees, government employees. And basically, there are 2 aspects to OSHA compliance standards. There's the regular standards, and then there's the general duty clause, which is a verbiage, this sentence here, embedded into the act, and it says that each employer shall furnish to each of his and her employees employment and a place of employment which are free from recognized hazards that are causing or likely to cause death or serious physical harm to their employees. So this is a very basic catch-all, as you can imagine. It addresses issues that are not yet covered by any existing standards because it takes them about 10 years to create a standard. So in the interim, this is what they use. They also issue employee emergency temporary standards. And if somehow they needed to actually give a citation to an employer, they would use the general duty clause to do that. And they also address things like ergonomics, because there is no ergonomic standards, or violence prevention, and other situations that are just not addressed by any particular standard would fall under this general duty clause. But because it's not specific, it's more difficult for them to actually do citations under here. So the top cited standards by the industry, in terms of OSHA citations, you have the manufacturing industry. It includes what is called lockout, tagout, respiratory protection, machine guarding, hazard communication is chemical safety, powered industrial trucks, meaning forklifts and the like. And in the construction industry, it's fall protection, scaffolding requirements, ladders, fall protection training, and eye and face protection. Healthcare is bloodborne pathogen is number 1, followed by the chemical safety hazard communication, which is pretty common across all employers, actually. Electrical requirements and the 300 log record keeping reporting of injuries and illnesses for the healthcare industry, and wiring methods and components. In the retail, the main standards include maintenance, safeguards, operational features of exit routes and such, powered industrial trucks, general electric requirements, again, HAZCOM, the chemical safety, which you will see in everything, handling materials, that's sort of ergonomics. And restaurant industries, on the top of the list is the hazard communication, the chemical safety, the record keeping, electrical, wiring, medical services. So that gives you some idea. But across the board, the top 10 most frequently cited standards are fall protection, again, hazard communication, that's the chemical safety, respiratory protection, scaffolding, ladders, lockout, tagout, powered trucks, fall protection, eye and face protection, machine guarding. Now, the types of violations that we have here, the most common, this is by the most common down to the top 10. But if you look to the right, the representation of how much the violations are don't follow the popularity. So fall protection is number one, but in terms of numbers of dollars, it's lockout tagout is number two, right? And then machine guarding, because those things tend to present greater hazards, even though they may not be as commonly cited. Other typical standards that are out there include abrasive wheel machinery, emergency action plans, foot protection, fire protection, hand protection, portable power tools, noise exposure, stairways, respiratory protection. So what types of OSHA violations are there? There is de minimis violations, which are just for mentioning. They don't cost anything, they don't mean anything, but it's just worth a mention. And then preferably you have other than serious violations, but it is a violation. Then you escalate to serious violations. And it's really there's where most people get in trouble, between the other than serious and the serious violations. Once you get to willful, that's pretty bad. It's not common, but that's them saying, it's not just a violation, but you knew it and you're willfully doing it. Then it gets really bad with repeat violations, meaning you already know about this, you've been in trouble for this, and yet it's still happening. This is particularly risky for larger organizations with multiple units and locations and entities, because if you have a violation, for example, the hazard communication, which is so common, right? The chemical safety one, in one unit or one plant or one location, and then it's found again in another one, it's considered a repeat violation because it's under the same management. Although, you might feel like you're very disconnected and you're each solo or siloed on its own. And of course, other violations include failure to abate prior violations. Here, I'm not going to go over this, but here's a little example of the maximum and minimal amounts of civil penalties for these types of violations. So per violation, there could be, from $0 to $975 or $9,000 up to $13,000, and then for willful it's $136,000. So, like I said, most of the violations are between $0 to about $13,000-$15,000 each. So it depends on the severity. It depends on. There's a lot of negotiation, and we'll get into that about how to determine what this is worth. And the OSHA, when the notice comes, it contains a date when the safety violation must be resolved. And companies that don't meet that date are subject to the maximum penalty per day. And an employer who willfully or repeatedly violates the requirements of these rules could be assessed a civil penalty of not more than $70,000 for each violation, and not less than 5. So there is a give. There's a lot of give and negotiation for especially size. And you mentioned small businesses. And this is an example for serious willful OSHA penalties. You could see that the penalties have been negotiated, percentage of the fine reduced immensely when there's 10 or fewer employees. And it goes down up until about 250 employees. And then they're kind of considered large enough to be able to manage these things. And the regular excuses kind of go away for that they would cut some slack for small employers. And there's a loss of that kind of leeway for getting a discount or penalty negotiation, depending on the size. So, for example, this is a massive organization that had a massive fine, but they had a settlement agreement. And you can see it's kind of creative. Since this is a farm, which had all sorts of employee safety issues, including COVID issues, they have agreed in the settlement agreement to provide $2 million in improvement in housing and quality of life and healthcare for the workers and their families. So they originally were fined $2 million, for egregious willful violations because of the sleeping arrangements and during the COVID and not keeping workers safe and transportation and all that. So they basically made an agreement to do capital improvements, right, and things like that. So Geber will spend about $150,000 to hire a full-time safety officer and for 3 years oversee the workplace safety and health development of the program. So as part of this agreement, in exchange for the improvements, the fine is reduced to 10,000. So you see how creative this can be, even for very, very large employers. It's not as simple. It's not like getting a speeding ticket and you just pay it. There's a lot of leeway for negotiation. So why would anyone get inspected? An employer will not, under penalty of law, be given prior notice. It's against the law for you to get any notice or warning that you're going to get an OSHA inspection. It's by law has to be a surprise. And the reasons why they would actually show up is because there's an imminent danger, a report of imminent danger, like something's going to collapse and it's on the brink of some tragedy, or there was some sort of fatality or serious accident, except for motor vehicle transport accidents on public roads, but including heart attacks. And if you know, as soon as you know about a work-related fatality or serious accident, you have to report that within 8 hours. So OSHA can also initiate an inspection, and they're not necessarily on site. Sometimes they just send you a letter or a fax because of an anonymous or formal complaint. So formal means somebody actually signed their name and they know who it is, but anonymous is, of course, unknown. But they take them equally as seriously. But again, if it's not something imminent and it seems something simple, they may reach out by, especially now, last year with the COVID, but sometimes they will show up depending on logistics, depending on availability, depending on the nature of the complaint and who's complaining. Referral from another agency, say the fire department was over there, the DEC was over there for whatever reasons, and they saw something and they make a referral. They also have programmed inspections. They make a list, based on the industry. They make a list based on the rates, your accident incident rates, your OSHA 300 reportable and lost time case rates. They make a program. So, they're never going to get through it because they're busy with other things, but they have a list. They also come back to follow up sometimes, not always, but oftentimes they will. And there's the special emphasis program. Those are for industries that have specifically higher injury rates than the general industry, and they focus on those people. So we recommend that you get ready for a mock inspection and create them yourselves. It's kind of like a tabletop exercise. You can use it to identify details, hitches, logistical problems. For example, until an inspector comes, or you can go through this mock process yourself, you find that, oh, gee, nobody has all the keys to everywhere this person needs to go. And then we're always wasting a lot of time waiting around to get somebody with the right keys. And that's a liability, because the longer they're there, the more likely they'll see things. So you want this to be efficient. So you can work out these hitches and logistical problems. What's the best way to lead them from point A to point B to expose them to the least of your operations? Because the less they see, the better. The less you have to explain, the less risk that something will be revealed that's a liability. So you can do a comprehensive evaluation of your overall safety program. And this can be done as part of a due diligence effort when you're acquiring another business as well. And the comprehensive mock OSHA inspection would include something like, actually going through the whole motions. It's a test of your reception, how people are received. Do they verify their identification, have them sign in, and escort and containment procedures. Containing as in, you don't let this person wander around. And now, especially COVID, people don't generally do that anyway. But in the past, sometimes, people are kind of free and be like, oh, the manager's just down go down this corridor, make a left. No, you want to escort this compliance officer the whole time so that you're in control of their whereabouts, what they see, and what they do, where they hang out. So it's a test and review of your OSHA 300 log readiness and your OSHA mandated written health and safety programs, employee safety training records, and injury illness records. Conduct your own walkthrough of your operations to identify safety hazards and things that could kick off a violation. And if applicable, a noise survey, air survey to quantify employee exposures if you have those kinds of risks. to make sure that you are under the permissible exposure limits. And there can be, and you can try this, interviews with up to 13% of your non-management employee population. Like, what would they say if they were asked by a compliance officer, what do you think of the safety program here? Have you had an accident? Do you know of other people who have accidents? What happened? Those are the kinds of questions they'd ask, and maybe you should ask them first. So before the inspection, like I said, you designate and train an employee management escort, someone who is going to be designated, and of course a secondary person, because inevitably the inspector will come the day that the designated person is out at a conference or on vacation. So have people lined up ready who know how to manage this process, and who know how to just keep this person contained and how to manage this person. And we're going to talk about how best to manage this inspection as it rolls out. Have a working safety program. That's the best way to be prepared. Ensure all training is conducted and records are kept for 3 years. Ensure your OSHA compliance management program and everything is in order. It's good to have a safety committee. If you don't have one, consider having one. Keeping minutes. This all helps, even if you have violations, to show you have good faith. Good faith means a lot. It helps to get things dismissed, or at least penalties reduced. If you have a health and safety program, which is not, by the way, required under OSHA, right? It's not one of the standards ever. But if you have one, it helps your case. It helps to show good faith, and so does the safety committee. Again, there was nothing in the standards saying that you needed to have a safety committee, but having these things help you show good faith, and it helps your arguments if and when you ever have to negotiate the penalties or citations. So after the arrival of the compliance officer, again, ask for verification, make sure, we check their credentials, have them sign in, keep them controlled, don't let them run around, get the right person to escort them, determine why they're there in the first place. Was it a complaint? Was it a reportable accident? Is it a programmed inspection? Was it an imminent danger report? So if it was a programmed inspection, ask for if it was focused, and what is the focus on? And when there is a focused inspection, the inspector is supposed to concentrate on that hazard causing the problem. They're not supposed to go beyond it, especially, and also if it's a complaint, they're supposed to go and address the complaint. They're not there to do a general overall inspection. So you can contain this by finding out why they're there in the first place. If you decide that it is your policy, you can ask the OSHA person to wait for them until you can contact senior management prior to starting the inspection. And they have a reasonable amount of time that they can wait, up to 1 hour, but it's really up to the discretion of the individual that is there. So of course, request an opening conference if the compliance officer doesn't call for one. Meaning, let's sit down and find out why you're here, what you're here to do, what's the scope of it, what do you need, what do you want. Have your dedicated facilities manager or other key operations manager present at this conference. Take detailed notes of everything discussed. Keep all publications and documents given. Know who gave it to you. Be cooperative and professional. This is not the time to pick a fight. Never enter into a personal argument with them. Advise the compliance officer that you expect them to advise you of any suspect violations that you want to know. You don't want any surprises, and you'd appreciate if they tell you. Only allow them to look at specific and relevant policies. Don't give them everything. Just give them what they ask for. If you had an IRS audit, it's quite the same thing, isn't it? Like, you really wouldn't want to. I'm just seeing somebody's chat saying all my inspections have been a surprise. Yeah, there's no such thing as a call. Yet. It's actually by law. They're not supposed to let you know in advance. So yeah, there's no point in getting into an argument with them, and only allow them to look at what you want them to, what they ask for. So for example, if the IRS comes to ask you for specific things, you just give them that, right? You don't say, oh, by the way, we have this other stuff you might want to look at. You don't do that, right? So it's the same with this. Always have the company representative well-versed in how to escort and deal with the compliance officer, accompany the inspector. Minimize their exposure to your activities and staff. Control the inspection. Treat the officer like a guest in your house or as any other visitor on your site. Tell them that you'll be taking your own notes, pictures, and videos at the same time they are. Take photographs and videos when they are. If you have a better position to do it from, do that too. Sometimes, a picture can be deceiving. If there's something that the compliance officer says that you don't understand, ask them for clarification. This is the best time. Try to have very good communication at that time so that they don't leave and then a couple weeks later or a couple months later, you get a citation you don't understand where it came from or how it came to be, right? That's what you're trying to avoid. So, advance, okay. So don't volunteer or give or allow the compliance officer to look at any safety inspection reports other than those that are required by them. Right? Don't point out violations or give orders to correct if this is not the time for you to conduct your own in-house inspection, right? You're just going with them. Keep your lips sealed. If you see something, fix it later. But this is not the time to give orders in front of them to try to fix something. Don't allow employees to give demonstrations or activities. Only perform the work that you do usually at the time of the inspection. So what I mean by this is, in controlling this is like, if you know you're going to take them somewhere, you need to take an elevator or stairs, and there's two alternatives. One is passing a place where you're doing elevator repairs. One is not. Pick the one that doesn't involve the elevator repair. There could be a problem there. Who knows? It may be a contractor. You just try to keep that Pandora's box as closed as possible. And at the end of the day, when the OSHA interviews you or the employees, just tell the truth. Make sure to answer the questions. But again, just answer the questions and nothing else. Employee interviews, the answers are going to be based on your knowledge only. Don't speculate and train your staff as well. Like, just tell them the truth, but don't make things up. If you don't know the answer, don't go out there and make things up. Like a typical booby trap is, oh, have you had fire extinguisher training? And maybe they didn't. And then the question is, well, I mean, if there was a fire in this trash can, would you try to use a fire extinguisher? Now that question, then that becomes a personal question. If the person has not been trained, then would they think, oh, well, I would be courageous and, be a good Samaritan and try to use the extinguisher to put out a small fire in the trash can. And then you could get cited for not training someone to use a fire extinguisher who would use it. So it goes back to also training people not to use fire extinguishers who are not trained to use it. You don't want them to, but it's also making sure people just don't come up with stuff on their own. Just answer the questions. And OSHA again can interview up to 13%. And if there's a union presence, they'll ask the union steward to pick those 13% up to the people that they will interview, and may or may not be in your presence. And if so, of course, you want to record the names. And an employee has the right to be interviewed and report issues without fear of reprisal. That's always covered, whistleblower protection under OSHA. And they also have a right to refuse the interview. You don't have to do it. And there should be a closing conference where you have the designated company representative present for the closing conference, takes notes, just debrief, ask them for a debriefing, what they found, what they think they saw, and you can have your discussions then about, why things are the way they are, or what you have done, or what they may not have seen or misunderstood. This is a time to try to clarify as much as possible and for you to know what's coming. Right? If they have problems with the audit, you should know what they are. Make sure no questions about the inspection go unanswered. And if the compliance officer says there was a violation, find out why and how. Don't give any estimates of abatement times needed or correct the alleged violations. After the closing conference, prepare your detailed reports so you have some memory, some memorandum of what had happened, because months can go by before you get a citation in the mail. Nobody remembers what happened. So whatever you do when you first get your citation, don't immediately hire an attorney. That's may not help right away. Whatever you do, don't delay, right? Postponing or addressing it. You have 15 days to contest. Within that 15 days is when you're going to do the most leveraging, actually. Do not follow the instructions, just pay the penalties. It's not like a speeding ticket, okay? Give it your immediate attention. Bring in your relevant team together. And then determine the validity, timeliness, accuracy, and reasonableness of each an individual citation and their penalties. And for each of them, create a strategy plan, right? To refute, explain, clarify actual compliance, demonstrate good faith. Again, that you have a workplace safety program, a safety committee, you have good intentions. Present your administrative, physical, organizational, structural engineering plans for improvements. Underscore lack of incidents or claims resulting of the said hazard in the past number of years. It is not uncommon for them, right? Because chemical hazard communication is always up there. Chemical safety is always being cited. You can go back to your OSHA log and say, hey, for 5 years, we haven't had one incident involving chemical safety. Not one, right? So that is a good argument. Showcase any existing semblance of a workplace health and safety program, whatever you got. Of course, you may not be 100%. If it's 30%, show your 30%. Do have this and have an informal conference with OSHA before the 15-day early on. And have this with the original inspector first, if you can, the person who actually came. Review these previous points. Try to get them to, negotiate the dismissing the citations, lowering the penalties, lowering the citation severity, from serious to non-serious, dismissing the penalties, negotiating penalties, and then, say you're going to submit a contest. You're going to reserve your right to contest this. It's best to take care of all this, if this hasn't been clear yet, at the lowest level possible. So the first thing to do is deal with the inspector who authored the citation in the first place. They were the ones who were there. They're the ones who dealt with. The next step before this 15-day period ends, you're going to be very busy for 15 days, right? Is to request a formal hearing, usually in person. That was pre-COVID, so maybe now they prefer to do it virtually. They'll review the same things. Now you're dealing with the area office director, dealing with the supervisor of the inspector who came, and reiterate your intention to contest. Because the local office, all right, the secret is this: the local offices, OSHA offices, they're loath to have this contest go to. It goes to the Department of Labor, to the attorneys in Washington, D.C., and they will almost certainly negotiate something to improve your position because they don't want this to happen. So it's kind of like your little bluff card to get them to just bring things down a bit, unless they're really adamant that you're a terrible actor. Ideally, you can extinguish this at this technical level, dealing with the compliance professionals, the bureaucrats, the technocrats. If that's still not satisfactory, you're going to go to contest. And now you're dealing with the attorneys in DC who have no local knowledge of the situation or technical knowledge. And this becomes a legal discussion and not a technical one. And they will also want to make this go away unless it's blatantly obvious that you are totally in the wrong, like the Geber Farms, where, again, you could see there's a lot of settlement. They're not trying to make money because they don't get the money, right? That's another misnomer. When they get the citations, penalties, they don't get the money. It just goes into the black hole of the Treasury, the U.S. Treasury. So they'd rather see things improve. They'd rather see things get better, as you can tell from the settlement that they had with Geber Farms. Still, there's room to negotiate and settle the terms. Now, if you are completely non-compliant, still try to go through these steps to reduce your citations. Again, focus on good faith and good intentions and your existing health and safety efforts. But eventually you need to comply, demonstrate compliance, meet deadlines, pay penalties. And then you have to be really careful with future repeat or willful citations, right? Because now you have whatever citations that you give into that you have to accept, they're going to be there for the future. So they present a risk for your organization to be a repeat and willful citation if it comes up again within your organization. And again, if you're more than one plant, that presents a problem because it's less likely another location is going to be as aware of the situation. So they really look at you as one management. So you should know all this, and it should be across the board. As far as COVID-19 reporting goes, if it's a confirmed case, you can really pretty much rule out anything else but work relatedness, which is difficult, right? It's even more difficult now because Delta is so much more transmissible. It was actually easier before to say that, wow, this was really work related. Now it's much harder. It involves medical treatment, days away from work, lost time, or death, which is what makes the OSHA recordable. Or fatalities are reported if you know about it. Hospital admissions, if you know about it. Again, if you can not rule out anything else but the fact that it's probably from work, then you're supposed to report it. And of course, you should report any outbreaks to the health department just to get the support for the contact tracing. And there were times when this was orderly, in places this was orderly, and sometimes they just were understaffed and couldn't deal with that. And so, of course, there's again, whistleblower protection and no retaliation to employees who report on or complain about COVID-19 issues. Now, they made a very a recent comment that they don't need you to record any adverse reactions to vaccines if you mandated them, because they don't want to present any resistance or present any barriers for people getting them. So for now, until May of 2022, you don't have to report any adverse reactions to vaccines, even though you've mandated it. And then some relevant, there's obviously not a COVID standard yet, and there isn't going to be. I don't think that there's the temporary standards for healthcare and health-related entities, but going forward, there's probably going to be some pandemic possibly. But again, it takes them 10 years standard. But they will fall back to some things that they already have, which we talked about. Personal protective equipment standard, where you're supposed to use a respirator and you're not using them, and there's requirements for medical clearance and fit testing and all that and training. Again, the general duty clause, where it's the catch-all for in case someone who's really doing a really sloppy job of doing COVID management and there's no standard for it, they will go under here. Right? And that's what some of the Gerber Farms citations were under general duty, because they weren't any COVID standards. Very important under COVID is the chemical safety, even though that's always been a thing, because the hazard communication is always in the top 10 for any industry. But we are using a lot more chemicals than we did before. So employees and people are being exposed to higher volumes and more frequent use of chemicals. We've had people ruining materials as a result of this. So we need to be careful about exposures and the proper use of that and the training, etc. So a lot of the common sanitizers, sterilizers, and all that have caustic and corrosive materials in them. I'm looking at a chat question. Is there an expiration on a violation where it would not be considered a repeat? For example, a violation occurred. Yes. Hamid, do you know? I think it's like 5 years. I don't remember. So anyway, Hamid, if you can find out before the end, that'd be good. But I think it's like 5 years. Yeah, it's not forever. Okay. And then Cal OSHA has a really good standard that we can, go by. You can always count on California having their own everything. So they're the bellwether. They're always ahead. So they're a model for a lot of these things. Oh, it's 3. Hi, Mark. Thank you. So I'm done chatting to myself. I feel like I'm chatting to myself, but I hope you're all really out there. Please go ahead and send in any questions. Leo, is that how it goes? People send in chats, questions.
Yes, you can ask your questions through either the Q&A function on the bottom of your screen or through chat, whichever is easier for you guys. If anybody has anything to share, that's yes, the COVID. Yeah, I just have a word about that. It's there's too many opinions about, and it's really best to just stick with the CDC guidelines, and they do change. And I know that's frustrating for people, but science changes, and that's a good thing. It would be really weird if we kept sticking to the same
we keep learning about new things, but we just stuck to our old ways. And it's changing quickly, and OSHA is, because it takes OSHA so long to create standards. What it does is it defers to like the NFPA, ANSI standards, and it defers to CDC, especially when it comes to infectious diseases. It just always defers to whatever the CDC guidelines is, because that makes much more sense. Is there anything else? Leo, am I missing anything? Is this everything?
Yep, it doesn't look like we've got any more questions coming in.
Okay. All right then. Hamid, do you have anything to add?
No, I think we're all good.
Okay. One more.
Oh,
Oh,
Brian is asking a question in the Q&A.
yeah, Hamid, I think it's 5. But let's there's no need for hanging.
As far as like the
Repeat.
time,
Yeah.
I think as long as it's happening within the first 2 years, it would consider like a repeated violation. But over that, it would be outside the consideration of repeated violation.
Wait, can you repeat that again? Oh, it's within 3 normally. However, OSHA will only classify a proposed citation as a repeat as within 3 years of final order date or the final abatement date. Yes, or whichever is later. Yeah. So, my sense of 5, the reason is that things move so slowly that officially it's 3 from when everything ended, but from when everything began, it's more like 5. So officially, it's from the final abatement date of the previous citation or the order date. Okay. So I think that's it. Hello?
Yeah.
Oh, do we have any more? I get your contact information. Oh yeah, you can contact us. It depends on where you are. It depends on what you're looking for. The contact for OSHA. Like on our OHS team, we have an ex-OSHA industrial hygienist and supervisor and inspector and all, it's the whole network of our professionals who are friends with them. And so it depends on what your question is and what your needs are. And also keep in mind, since this is through NFP and NFP is about insurance, one has absolutely nothing to do with the other. Okay, your OSHA citations, your outcomes has no impact on a claim. And what happens with a claim really has nothing to do with OSHA. And they even have different definitions for what's medical treatment, what's first aid. Don't confuse the two when you do record keeping. Thank you, everybody. Is there anything else? Yeah, anyone else? Last dibs, last calls.
Looks like you have a question in there from Rachel in the chat pod.
Go ahead.
It says, if I have an employee based internationally in the US for business and is injured, do I need to include that in my OSHA report?
At the location that they're working at, yes. It would be recorded at the location that they're working at. And I know this is becoming a real issue for them now because people are not even working at their locations, right? Look at me. Look at all of you. Where are you? Are you anywhere near where you used to work? So I think there's going to be more guidance and questions about this. For example, all these ergonomic slip, trips, and falls that are happening at work, claims is one thing. But as far as OSHA is concerned, you are still responsible for, quote, their work area. All right, so I had this totally different discussion, and how you record them. I think so far they're going by where their work assigned places so far, but that may become moot over time, and especially like sales or service people who are driving around and all. It's wherever they're assigned to. Their corporate office. Is there any more? Am I missing anything?
No, it doesn't look like there's any more questions.
Okay, great. Well, good. I was hoping to get under, 45 minutes, because that's when I start losing patience with whoever's talking. So I thank you for your time. And, you have our contact information for any inquiries, please feel free. That's what we're here for. Righty.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Well, thanks, Elsie and Hamid, for sharing your time and expertise with us today. I did want to reiterate that we did record today's presentation. That recording will be made available within 2 business days. Additionally, at this time, I'd like to take a moment to ask you guys if you have a minute or two to take a short survey today. That survey will populate in a new window when you exit out of Zoom. Like I said, it's only about 2 to 3 minutes. If you could take a brief moment to complete that survey, it lets us know what topics are important to our listeners, and it helps us to make our education program as current and relevant as possible. That concludes our webinar for today. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us. Have a great day.
Bye.